The text you're about to listen to, by James Allen, was written in the style of its time, that is to say, in somewhat archaic English, and written by men for men. But as Allen himself has asserted, the teachings are for mankind, not just for men. The material is utterly profound and life-changing. So we have taken the liberty of adapting and updating the text, only where we felt it would be skillful, to make it more accessible to modern generations, without changing the meaning or the intention of the text, and without making any copyright claims regarding our versions of his sublime works. The original versions can all be found freely available online in the public domain, should you prefer to read them in their original form. Thank you, and bless you. From Passion to Peace, by James Allen. Forward. The first three parts of this book, Passion, Aspiration, and Temptation, represent the common human life, with its passion, pathos, and tragedy. The last three parts, Transcendence, Beatitude, and Peace, represents the divine life, calm, wise, and beautiful, of the sage and saviour. The middle part, Transmutation, is the transitional stage between the two. It's the alchemic process linking the divine with the human life. Discipline, denial, and renunciation do not constitute the divine state. They are only the means by which it's attained. The divine life is established in that perfect knowledge which bestows perfect peace. James Allen. Amid the din and strife of men, the call divine I hear again. Its telling is of things apart, above the tumult of the heart. High o'er where sin's dark pathways wind, waits the wise willing of the mind. Beyond strong passion's guarded gates, there peace awaits. There peace awaits. Chapter 1. Passion. The pathway of the saints and sages, the road of the wise and the pure, the highway along which the saviours have trod, and which all saviours to come will also walk. Such is the subject of this book. Such is the high and holy theme which the author briefly expounds in these pages. Passion is the lowest level of human life. None can descend lower. In its chilling swamps and concealing darkness creep and crawl the creatures of the sunless world. Lust, hatred, anger, covetousness, pride, vanity, greed, revenge, envy, backbiting, lying, theft, deceit, treachery, cruelty, suspicion, jealousy. Such are the brute forces and blind, unreasoning impulses that inhabit the underworld of passion and roam devouring and devoured in the rank primeval jungles of the human mind. There also dwell the dark shapes of remorse, pain, and suffering, and the drooping forms of grief, sorrow, and lamentation. In this dark world the unwise live and die, not knowing the peace of purity, nor the joy of that divine light which forever shines above them and for them. Yet it shines in vain so long as it falls on unseeing eyes which don't look up, but are ever bent earthward, fleshward. But the wise look up. They are not satisfied with this passion world. They bend their steps towards the upper world of peace, the light and the glory of which they behold, at first far off, but nearer and nearer with ever-increasing splendour as they ascend. None can fall lower than passion, but all can rise higher. In that lowest place where further descent is impossible, all who move forward must ascend. The ascending pathway is always at hand, near and easily accessible. It is the way of self-conquest. They have already entered it, who have begun to say no to their selfishness, who have begun to discipline their desires and to control and command the unruly elements of their minds. Passion is the archenemy of mankind, the slayer of happiness, the opposite and enemy of peace. From it proceeds all that defiles and destroys. It is the source of misery and the promoter of mischief and disaster. The inner world of selfishness is rooted in ignorance, ignorance of the divine law, of divine goodness, ignorance of the pure way and the peaceful path. Passion is dark, and it thrives and flourishes in spiritual darkness. It cannot enter the regions of spiritual light. In the enlightened mind, the darkness of ignorance is destroyed. In the pure heart, there is no place for passion. Passion in all of its forms is a mental thirst, a fever, a torturing unrest. As a fire consumes a magnificent building, reducing it to a heap of unsightly ashes, so are we consumed by the flames of passions, and our deeds and works fall and perish. If we would find peace, we must come out of passion. The wise subdue their passions. The foolish are subdued by them. The seekers of wisdom begin by turning their back on foolishness. The lovers of peace enter the way which leads to that place, and with every step they take, they leave the dark dwelling place of passion and despair further below and behind them. The first step towards the heights of wisdom and peace is to understand the darkness and misery of selfishness, and when that is understood, the overcoming of it, the coming out of it, will follow. Selfishness, or passion, not only subsists in the gross forms of greed and glaringly ungoverned conditions of mind, it informs also every hidden thought which is subtly connected with the assumption and glorification of one's self. It is most deceiving and subtle when it prompts one to dwell upon the selfishness in others, to accuse them of it, and to talk about it. Those who continually dwell upon the selfishness in others will not thus overcome their own selfishness. Not by accusing others do we come out of selfishness, but by purifying ourselves. The way of passion to peace is not by hurling painful charges against others, but by overcoming one's self. By eagerly striving to subdue the selfishness of others, we remain passion-bound. By patiently overcoming our own selfishness, we ascend into freedom. Only those who have conquered themselves can subdue others, and they are subdued, not by passion, but by love. The foolish accuse others and justify themselves, but those who are becoming wise justify others and accuse themselves. The way from passion to peace is not in the outer world of people, it's in the inner world of thoughts. It doesn't consist in altering the deeds of others, it consists in perfecting one's own deeds. Frequently, those of passion are most eager to put others right, but those of wisdom put themselves right. If you are anxious to reform the world, begin by reforming yourself. The reformation of self doesn't end with the elimination of the sensual elements only. That is its beginning. It ends only when every vain thought and selfish aim is overcome. Short of perfect purity and wisdom, there is still some form of self-slavery or foolishness which needs to be conquered. Passion is at the base of the structure of life. Peace is at its crown and summit. Without passion to begin with, there would be no power to work with, and no achievement to end with. Passion represents power, but power misdirected. Power producing hurt instead of happiness. Its forces, while instruments of destruction in the hands of the foolish, are instruments of preservation in the hands of the wise. When curbed and concentrated and beneficially directed, they represent working energy. Passion is the flaming sword which guards the gates of paradise. It shuts out and destroys the foolish. It admits and preserves the wise. The foolish are those who do not know the extent of their own ignorance, who are slaves of thoughts of self, who obey the impulses of passion. The wise are those who know their own ignorance, who understand the emptiness of selfish thoughts, who master the impulses of passion. The fool descends into deeper and deeper ignorance. The wise ascend into higher and higher knowledge. The fool desires, suffers, and dies. The wise aspire, rejoice, and live. With mind intent on wisdom and mental gaze raised upward, the spiritual warriors perceive the upward way and fix their attention, upon the heights of peace. Chapter 2. Aspiration. With the clear perception of one's own ignorance comes the desire for enlightenment, and thus in the heart is born aspiration, the rapture of saints. On the wings of aspiration you rise from earth to heaven, from ignorance to knowledge, from the under darkness to the upper light. Without it you remain a grovelling animal, earthly, sensual, unenlightened, and uninspired. Aspiration is the longing for heavenly things, for righteousness, compassion, purity, love, as distinguished from desire, which is the longing for earthly or worldly things, for selfish possessions, personal dominance, low pleasures, and sensual gratifications. As a bird deprived of its wings cannot soar, so those without aspiration cannot rise above their surroundings and become master of their animal inclinations. They are the slave of passions, are subject to others, and are carried here and there by the changing current of events. For you to begin to aspire means that you are dissatisfied with your low status and are aiming at a higher connection. It is a sure sign that you are aroused out of your lethargic sleep of animality and have become conscious of nobler attainments and a fuller life. Aspiration makes all things possible. It opens the way to advancement. It brings near and makes even the highest state of perfection conceivable, real and possible. For that which can be conceived can be achieved. Aspiration is the twin angel to inspiration. It unlocks the gates of joy. Singing accompanies soaring. Music, poetry, prophecy, and all high and holy instruments are at last placed in the hands of those whose aspirations do not weaken, whose spirit does not fail. So long as animal conditions taste sweet to you, you cannot aspire. You are already satisfied. But when the sweetness turns to bitterness, then in your sorrow you think of nobler things. When you are deprived of earthly, worldly joy, you aspire to the joy which is heavenly. It is when impurity turns to suffering that purity is sought. Truly aspiration rises, phoenix-like from the dead ashes of repentance, but on its powerful wings you can reach the heaven of heavens. With aspiration you have entered the way which ends in peace, and you will surely reach that end if you neither stay nor turn back. If you constantly renew your mind with glimpses of the heavenly vision, you will reach that heavenly state. You attain in the measure that you aspire. Your longing to be is the gauge of what you can be. To fix the mind is to predetermine, to predestine the achievement. As you can experience and know all low things, so you can experience and know all high things. As you have become human, so can you become divine. The sole and needful task is the turning of the mind in high and divine directions. What is impurity but the impure thoughts of the thinker? What is purity but the pure thoughts of the thinker? One does not do the thinking of another. Each of us are pure or impure of ourselves alone. If you think it is through others or circumstances or genetics that I am impure, how can you hope to overcome your errors? Such a thought will stop or slow down all holy aspirations and bind you to the slavery of passion. When you fully perceive that your errors and impurities are your own, that they are generated and fostered by yourself, that you alone are responsible for them, then you will aspire to overcome them. The way of attainment will be opened up to you, and you will see from where and to what destination you are traveling. Those of passion see no straight path before them, and behind them is all fog and gloom. They seize the pleasures of the moment and do not strive for understanding or think of wisdom. Their way is confused, turbulent, and troubled, and their hearts are far from peace. Those of aspiration see before them the pathway up the heavenly heights, and behind them are the twisting and turning roots of passion along which they have so blindly groped until now. Striving for understanding, and their minds set on wisdom, their way is clear, and their hearts already experience a sample of the final peace. Those of passion strive mightily to achieve little things, things which speedily perish, and in the place where they were, leave nothing to be remembered. Those of aspiration strive with equal might to achieve great things, things of virtue, of knowledge, of wisdom, which do not perish, but stand as monuments of inspiration for the uplifting of humankind. As the merchant achieves worldly success by persistent exertion, so the saint achieves spiritual success by aspiration and endeavor. One becomes a merchant, the other a saint, by the particular direction in which their mental energy is guided. When the rapture of aspiration touches the mind, it at once refines it, and the dross of its impurities begin to fall away. While aspiration holds the mind, no impurity can enter it, for the impure and the pure cannot occupy thought at the same moment. But the effort of aspiration is at first spasmodic and short-lived. The mind falls back into its habitual error and must be constantly renewed. The lovers of the pure life renew their minds daily with the invigorating glow of aspiration. They rise early and fortify their minds with strong thoughts and strenuous endeavors. They know that the mind is of such a nature that it cannot remain unoccupied for even a moment, and that if it's not held and guided by high thoughts and pure aspirations, it will assuredly be enslaved and misguided by low thoughts and base desires. Aspiration can be fed, fostered, and strengthened by daily habit, just as is desire. It can be sought and admitted into the mind as a divine guide, or it can be neglected and shut out. To retire for a short time each day to some quiet spot, preferably in the open air, and there call up the energies of the mind in surging waves of holy rapture, is to prepare the mind for great, divinely important spiritual victories and destinies. For such a rapture is the preparation for wisdom and the prelude to peace. Before the mind can contemplate pure things, it must be lifted up to them. It must rise above impure things, and aspiration is the instrument by which this is accomplished. By its aid, the mind soars swiftly and surely into heavenly places and begins to experience divine things. It begins to accumulate wisdom and learn to guide itself by an ever-increasing measure of the divine light of pure knowledge. To thirst for righteousness, to hunger for the pure life, to rise in holy rapture on the wings of angelic aspiration. This is the right road to wisdom. This is the right striving for peace. This is the right beginning of the way divine. Chapter 3. Temptation. Aspiration can carry you into heaven, but to remain there you must learn to conform your entire mind to the heavenly conditions. To this end, temptation works. Temptation is the backsliding in thought from purity to passion. It is going back from aspiration to desire. It threatens aspiration until the point is reached where desire is quenched in the waters of pure knowledge and calm thought. In the early stages of aspiration, temptation is subtle and powerful, and is regarded as an enemy. But it is only an enemy in the sense that by succumbing to temptation, you are your own enemy, in the sense that it's the revealer of weakness and impurity. It is a friend, a necessary factor in spiritual training. It is indeed an accompaniment of the effort to overcome evil or ignorance and apprehend good. To be successfully conquered, the evil in you must come to the surface and present itself, and it is in temptation that the evil hidden in the heart stands revealed and exposed. That which temptation appeals to and arouses is unconquered desire, and temptation will again and again attack you until you have lifted yourself above the lusting impulses. Temptation is an appeal to the impure. That which is pure cannot be subject to temptation. Temptation ambushes those of aspiration until they touch the region of the divine consciousness, and beyond that border, temptation cannot follow them. It is when you begin to aspire that you begin to be tempted. Aspiration rouses up all the latent good and evil in order that you may be fully revealed to yourself, because you can't overcome yourself unless you fully know yourself. It can be scarcely said of those who are merely animalistic that they are tempted, for the very presence of temptation means that there is a striving for a purer state. Animal desire and gratification is the normal condition for those who have not yet risen into aspiration. They wish for nothing more, nothing better than their sensual enjoyments, and are, for the present, satisfied. Such men and women cannot be tempted to fall because they have not yet risen. The presence of aspiration signifies that you have taken one step, at least, upward, and are therefore capable of being drawn back down. This backward attraction is called temptation. The attractions of temptation subsist in the impure thoughts and downward desires of the heart. The object of temptation is powerless to attract when the heart no longer lusts for it. The stronghold of temptation is within you, not without. And until you realize this, the period of temptation will be prolonged. While you continue to run away from outward worldly objects under the delusion that temptation subsists entirely in them, and do not attack and purge away your impure imaginings, your temptations will increase, and your falls will be many and grievous. When you clearly perceive that the evil is within and not without, then your progress will be rapid, your temptations will decrease, and the final overcoming of all temptation will be well within the range of your spiritual vision. Temptation is torment. It is not an abiding condition, but is a passage from a lower condition to a higher. The fullness and perfection of life is bliss, not torment. Temptation accompanies weakness and defeat, but you are destined for strength and victory. The presence of torment is the signal to rise and conquer. Those of you of persistent and ever-renewed aspiration will not allow yourselves to think that temptation cannot be overcome. You are determined to be a master of yourself. Resignation to evil is an acknowledgement of defeat. It signifies that the battle against self is abandoned, that good is denied, that ignorance is made supreme. As the energetic businessman is not daunted by difficulties but studies how to overcome them, so those of ceaseless aspiration are not crushed into submission by temptations, but meditate how they may fortify their minds. For the tempter is like a coward, he only creeps in at weak and unguarded points. The tempted one should study thoughtfully the nature and meaning of temptation, for until it is known it cannot be overcome. A wise general, before attacking the opposing force, studies the tactics of his enemy. Likewise, those of you who are to overcome temptation must understand how it arises in your darkness and error, and must study by introspection and meditation how to disperse the darkness and supplant error by truth. The stronger your passions, the fiercer will be your temptations. The deeper your selfishness, the more subtle your temptations. The more pronounced your vanity, the more flattering and deceptive your temptations. You must know yourself if you are to know the truth. You must not shrink away from any revelation which will expose your error. On the contrary, you must welcome such revelations as aids to that self-knowledge which is the servant of self-conquest. Those who cannot endure to have their errors and shortcomings brought to the surface and made known, but try to hide them, are unfit to walk the highway of truth. They are not properly equipped to battle with and overcome temptation. Those who can't fearlessly face their lower nature can't climb the rugged heights of renunciation. Let the tempted one know this, that you yourself are both tempter and tempted, that all of your enemies are within, that the flatterers which seduce, the taunts which stab, and the flames which burn all spring from that inner region of ignorance and error in which you have lived until now. Knowing this, you will be assured of complete victory over evil. When you are sorely tempted, don't mourn, therefore, but rejoice in that your strength is tried and your weakness exposed. For those of you who truly know and humbly acknowledge your weakness will not be slow in setting about the acquisition of strength. The foolish blame others for their lapses and sins, but the truth-lovers blame only themselves. Acknowledge complete responsibility for your own conduct. And when you fall, don't say this thing or such and such a circumstance or that person is to blame. For the most which others can do is to offer an opportunity for our own good or evil to manifest itself. They can't make us good or evil. Temptation is at first sore, grievous, and hard to bear, and the assailant is subtle and persistent. But if the tempted one is firm and courageous and doesn't give way, they will gradually subdue their spiritual enemy and will finally triumph in the knowledge of good. The adverse one is compounded of their own lust, selfishness, and pride. When these are put away, evil is seen to be naught, and good is revealed in all victorious splendor. Chapter 4. Transmutation. Midway between the hell of passion and the heaven of peace is the purgatory of transmutation. Not a speculative purgatory beyond the grave, but a real purgatory in the human heart. In its separating and purifying fire, the base metal of error is sifted away, and only the clarified gold of truth remains. When temptation has culminated in sorrow and deep perplexity, then the tempted one, strenuously striving for deliverance, finds that their moral servitude is entirely from themselves. Instead of fighting against outer circumstances, you must alter inner conditions. The fight against outer things is necessary at the start. It is the only course which can be adopted at first because of the prevailing ignorance of mental causation. But it never of itself brings about freedom. What it does bring about is the knowledge of the mental cause of temptation. This knowledge of the mental cause of temptation leads to the transmutation of thought, and the transmutation of thought leads to deliverance from the bondage of delusion. The preliminary fighting is a necessary stage in spiritual development, just as the crying and kicking of a helpless baby is necessary for its growth. But as the crying and kicking is not needed beyond the infant stage, so the fierce struggling with and falling under temptation ends when the knowledge of mental transmutation is acquired. The truly wise, those who are enlightened concerning the source and cause of temptation, do not fight against outward temptations. They abandon all desire for them. In this way, they stop being temptations, and the power of temptation is destroyed at its source. But this abandonment of unholy desire is not a final process. It's the beginning of a regenerative and transforming power which, when patiently employed, leads to the clear and cloudless heights of spiritual enlightenment. Spiritual transmutation consists of an entire reversal of the ordinary self-seeking attitude of the mind towards people and things, and this reversal brings about an entirely new set of experiences. Thus, the desire for a certain pleasure is abandoned, cut off at its source, and not allowed to have any place in the consciousness. But the mental force which that desire represented is not annihilated, it is transferred to a higher region of thought, transmuted into a purer form of energy. The law of conservation of energy prevails universally in the mind as it does in matter, and the force shut off in lower directions is liberated in higher realms of spiritual activity. Along the saintly way towards the divine life, the midway region of transmutation is the country of sacrifice, the plain of renunciation. Old passions, old ambitions and thoughts are cast away and abandoned, but only to reappear in some more beautiful, more permanent, more eternally satisfying form. Valuable jewels, long guarded and cherished, when thrown tearfully into the melting pot, are remolded into new and more perfect enhancements. Likewise you, the spiritual alchemist, at first reluctant to part company with long-cherished thoughts and habits, at last give them up to discover, a little later, to your joy, that they come back to you in the form of new facilities, rarer powers, and purer joys. Spiritual jewels newly polished, beautiful, and resplendent. In transmuting your mind from evil to good, you come to distinguish more and more clearly between error and truth, and so distinguishing, you cease to be swayed and prompted by outward things and by the actions and attitudes of others. Instead, you act from your knowledge of truth, first acknowledging your errors, then confronting them with a searching mind and a humble heart. You subdue, conquer, and transmute them. The early stage of transmutation is painful but brief, for the pain is soon transformed into pure spiritual joy, the brevity of the pain being measured by the intelligence and energy with which the process is pursued. While you think that the cause of your pain is in the attitude of others, you will not pass beyond it. But when you perceive that its cause is in yourself, then you will pass beyond it into joy. The unenlightened allow themselves to be disturbed, wounded, and overthrown by what they regard as the wrong attitudes of others towards them. This is because the same wrong attitude is in themselves. They then indeed dole out to them in return the same actions regarding as right in themselves that which is wrong in others. Slander is given for slander, hatred for hatred, anger for anger. This is the action and reaction of evil. It's the clash of selfishness with selfishness. It is only the self or selfish elements within you that can be aroused by the evil in another. The truth or divine characteristics in you cannot be approached by that evil, much less can you be disturbed and overthrown by it. It is the conversion or complete reversal of this self or selfishness into truth that constitutes transmutation. As one of the enlightened, you have abandoned the delusion that the evil in others has the power to hurt and subdue you, and you have grasped the profound truth that you are only overthrown by the evil in yourself. You therefore cease to blame others for your sins and sufferings, and apply yourself to purifying your own heart. In this reversal of your mental attitude, you transmute the lower selfish forces into the higher moral attributes. The base ore of error is cast into the fire of sacrifice, and there comes forth the pure gold of truth. You stand firm and unmoved when assailed by outward things. You are self's master, not its slave. You have ceased to identify yourself with the impulses of passion and have identified yourself with truth. You have overcome evil and have become merged in good. You know both error and truth, and have abandoned error and brought yourself into harmony with truth. You return good for evil. The more you are attacked by evil from without, the greater is your opportunity of manifesting the good from within. That which supremely differentiates the foolish from the wise is this, that the fool meets passion with passion, hatred with hatred, and returns evil for evil, whereas the wise meet passion with peace, hatred with love, and returns good for evil. You inflict suffering upon yourself through the active instrumentality of your own unpurified nature. You rise into perfect peace in the measure that you purify your heart. The mental energy which you waste in pursuing dark passions is all sufficient to enable you to reach the highest wisdom when it is turned in the right direction. As water, when transmuted into steam, becomes a new, more definite and wide-reaching power, so passion, when transmuted into intellectual and moral force, becomes a new life, a new power for the accomplishment of high and unfailing purposes. Mental forces, like molecular, have their own opposite poles or modes of action. Where the negative pole is, there is also the positive. Where ignorance is, wisdom is possible. Where passion abounds, peace awaits. Where there is much suffering, much bliss is near. Sorrow is the negation of joy. Sin is the opposite of purity. Evil is the denial of good. Where there is an opposite, there is that which is opposed. The adverse evil, in its denial of the good, testifies to its presence. The one thing needful, therefore, is the turning around from the negative to the positive, the conversion of the heart from the impure desires to pure aspirations, the transmutation of passional forces into moral powers. The wise purify their thoughts. They turn from bad deeds and do good deeds. They put error behind them and approach truth. In this way they rise above the allurements of sin, above the torments of temptation, above the dark world of sorrow, and enter the divine consciousness, the transcendent life. Chapter 5. Transcendence. When you pass from the dark stage of temptation to the more enlightened stage of transmutation, you have become a saint. A saint is one who perceives the need for self-purification, who understands the way of self-purification, and who has entered that way and is engaged in perfecting themselves. But there comes a time in the process of transmutation when, with the decrease of evil and the accumulation of good, there dawns in the mind a new vision, a new consciousness, a new being. When this is reached, the saint has become a sage. They have passed from the human life to the divine life. They are born again, and there begins for them a new round of experiences. They wield a new power. A new universe opens out before their spiritual gaze. This is the stage of transcendence. This I call the transcendent life. When there is no more consciousness of sin, when anxiety and doubt and grief and sorrow are ended, when lust and animosity and anger and envy no more possess the thoughts, when there remains in the mind no vestige of blame towards others or for one's own condition, and when all conditions are seen to be good because they are the result of causes, so that no event can afflict the mind, then transcendence is attained. Then the limited personality is outgrown and the divine life is known. Evil is transcended and good is all in all. The divine consciousness is not an intensification of the human. It is a new form of consciousness. It springs from the old, but is not a continuance of it. Born of the lower life of sin and sorrow, after a period of painful torment, it yet transcends that life and has no part in it, just as the perfect flower transcends the seed from which it sprang. As passion is the keynote of the self-life, so serenity is the keynote of the transcendent life. Rising into it, you are lifted above disharmony and disturbance. When perfect good is realized and known, not as an opinion or an idea, but as an experience or a possession, then calm vision is acquired, and tranquil joy abides through all hardships. The transcendent life is ruled not by passions, but by principles. It's founded not upon fleeting impulses, but upon abiding laws. In a clear atmosphere, the orderly sequence of all things is revealed, so that there is seen to be no room for sorrow, anxiety, or regret. While men are involved in the passions of self, they burden themselves with cares and trouble themselves over many things. Above all else, they trouble over their own little, burdened, pain-stricken personality, being anxious for its fleeting pleasures, for its protection and preservation, and for its eternal safety and continuance. Now, in the life that is wise and good, all this is transcended. Personal interests are replaced by universal purposes, and all cares, troubles, and anxieties concerning the pleasure and the fate of the personality are dispelled like the feverish dreams of a night. Passion is blind and ignorant. It sees and knows only its own gratification. Self recognizes no law. Its object is to get and to enjoy. The getting is a graduated scale varying from sensual greed through many subtle vanities up to the desire for a personal heaven or personal immortality, but it is self still. It's the old sensual craving coming out in a more subtle and deceptive form. It's longing for some personal delight, along with its accompanying fear that delight should be lost forever. In the transcendent state, desire and dread are ended, and the thirst for gain and the fear of loss are things that are no more. For where the universal order is seen, and where perennial joy in that good is a normal condition, what is there left to desire? What remains to be feared? Those of you who have brought your entire nature into conformity and harmony with the law of righteousness, who have made your thoughts pure and your deeds blameless, have entered liberty. You have transcended darkness and mortality, and have passed into light and immortality. For the transcendent state is at first a higher order of morality, then a new form of perception, and at last a comprehensive understanding of the universal moral causation. And this morality, this vision, and this understanding constitute the new consciousness, the divine life. As one of the transcendent, you are above and beyond the dominion of self. You have transcended evil and live in the practice and knowledge of good. You are like one who, having long looked upon the world with darkened eyes, are now restored to sight and see things as they are. Evil is an experience and not a power. If it were an independent power in the universe, it could not be transcended by any being. But though not real as a power, it is real as a condition and an experience. For all experience is of the nature of reality. It is a state of ignorance, of retrogression, and as such it recedes and disappears before the light of knowledge, as the intellectual ignorance of a child vanishes before the gradually accumulating learning, or as darkness dissolves before the rising light. The painful experiences of evil pass away as the new experiences of good enter into and possess the field of consciousness. And what are the new experiences of good? They are many and beautiful, such as the joyful knowledge of the freedom from sin. They are the absence of remorse and deliverance from all torment of temptation. They are ineffable joy in conditions and circumstances which formerly caused deep affliction and imperviousness to be hurt by the actions of others. They are great patience and sweetness of character, serenity of mind under all circumstances, and emancipation from doubt, fear, and anxiety. They are freedom from all dislike, envy, and animosity, with the power to feel and act kindly towards those who see fit to constitute themselves as one's enemies or opponents. They are the divine power to give blessings for curses and to return good for evil, a deep knowledge of the human heart with a perception of its fundamental goodness, and insight into the law of moral causation and the mental evolution of beings, with a prophetic foresight of the sublime good that awaits humanity. Above all, they are glad rejoicing in the limitation and impotence of evil, and in the eternal supremacy and power of good. All these, and the calm, strong, far-reaching life that these imply and contain, are the rich experiences of the transcendent soul. Along with all the new and varied resources, the vast powers, the quickened abilities, and enlarged capacities that spring to life in the new consciousness. Transcendence is surpassing virtue. Evil and good cannot live together. Evil must be abandoned, left behind and transcended before good is grasped and known. When good is practiced and fully comprehended, then all the afflictions of the mind are at an end. For what is accompanied by pain and sorrow in the awareness of evil is not accompanied by the same feelings in the awareness of good. Whatsoever happens to those who are good cannot cause them confusion or sorrow, for they know its cause and issue, know the good which it is ordained to accomplish in themselves, and so their minds remain happy and serene. Though the bodies of those who are good may be bound, their minds are free. Though they may be wounded and in pain, joy and peace abide within their hearts. A spiritual teacher had a pupil who was apt and earnest. After several years of learning and practice, the pupil one day offered a question for discussion which his master could not answer. After days of deep meditation, the master said to his pupil, "I cannot answer that question which you have asked. Have you any solution to offer?" Whereupon the pupil formulated a reply to the question which he had propounded. The master then said to him, "You have answered that which I could not, and henceforth neither I nor any man can instruct you. For now you are indeed instructed by truth. You have soared like the kingly eagle, where no man can follow. Your work is now to instruct others. You are no longer a pupil, you have become a master." In looking back on the self-life which you have transcended, as one of the divinely enlightened, you see all the afflictions of that life as though your schoolmasters were teaching and leading you upward. And in the measure that you penetrated their meaning and lifted yourself above them, they departed from you. Their mission to teach you having ended, they left you the triumphant master of the field. For the lower cannot teach the higher. Ignorance cannot instruct wisdom. Evil cannot enlighten good. Nor can the pupil set lessons for that master. That which is transcended cannot reach up to that which transcends. Evil can only teach in its own sphere, where it is regarded as master. In the sphere of good, it has no place and no authority. As the strong traveller on the highway of truth, you know no such thing as resignation to evil. You know only obedience to good. Those who submit to evil, saying, "Sin cannot be overcome and evil must be borne," thereby acknowledge that evil is their master. It is not their master to instruct them, but to bind and oppress them. As a lover of good, you cannot also be a lover of evil, nor can you for one moment allow its ascendancy. You elevate and glorify good, not evil. You love light, not darkness. When you make truth your master, you abandon error. As you transcend error, you become more like your master, until at last you become one with truth, teaching it as master, by your actions and reflecting it in your life. Transcendence is not an abnormal condition. It belongs to the orderly process of evolution, though as yet few have reached it. All will come to it in the course of the ages. And you, who have ascended into it, sin no more, sorrow no more, and are no more troubled. Good are your thoughts, good are your actions, and the good is the tranquil tenor of your way. You have conquered self, and have submitted to truth. You have mastered evil, and have comprehended good. Henceforth neither men nor books can instruct you, for you are instructed by the supreme good, the Spirit of truth. Chapter 6. Beatitude. When divine good is practiced, life is bliss. Bliss is the normal condition of those who are good. Those outer assaults, harassments, and persecutions which bring such sufferings to others only serve to heighten your happiness, for they cause the deep fountain of good within you to well up in greater abundance. To have transcendent virtue is to enjoy transcendent happiness. The beatific blessedness which Jesus holds out is promised to those having the heavenly virtues, to the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, and so on. The higher virtue doesn't merely and only lead to happiness, it is happiness. It is impossible for those of transcendent virtue to be unhappy. The cause of unhappiness must be sought and found in the self-loving elements, and not in the self-sacrificing qualities. You may have virtue and be unhappy, but not so if you have divine virtue. Human virtue is mingled with self, and therefore with sorrow. But from divine virtue every taint of self has been purged away, and with it every vestige of misery. One comparison will suffice to illustrate this. A man may have the courage of a lion in attack and self-defense, such courage being a human virtue, but he will not thereby be rendered supremely happy. However, you whose courage is that of the divine kind, which enables you to transcend both attack and defense, and to remain mild, serene, and lovable under attack, you will thereby be rendered supremely happy. Moreover, your assailant will be rendered more happy, in that a more powerful good will overcome and cast out the fierce and unhappy evil of the other. The acquisition of human virtue is a great step towards truth, but the divine way transcends it. Truth lies upward and beyond. Doing good in order to gain a personal heaven or personal immortality is human virtue, but it is not unmixed with self and not emancipated from sorrow. In the transcendent virtues, all is good and good is all, and there is no personal or ulterior aim. Human virtue is imperfect. It is mixed with the baser, selfish elements and needs to be transmuted. Divine virtue is unblemished and pure. It is complete and perfect in itself. And what are the transcendent virtues that embody all happiness and joy? They are impartiality, the seeing so deeply into the human heart and into human actions that it becomes impossible to take sides with one man or one party against the other, and therefore the power to be perfectly just. Unlimited kindness towards all men, women, and all creatures, whether enemies or friends. Perfect patience at all times, in all circumstances, and under the severest trials. Profound humility, the total surrender of self, the judging of one's own actions as though they were the actions of another. Stainless purity of mind and deed, freedom from all evil thoughts and impure imaginings. Unbroken calmness of mind, even in the midst of outward strife, or surrounded by the turmoil of many hardships and difficulties. Abiding goodness of heart, impervious to evil, returning good for evil. Compassion, deep pity for all creatures and beings in their sufferings, shielding the weak and helpless, and protecting out of compassion even one's enemies from injury and slander. Abounding love towards all living things, rejoicing with the happy and successful, and sympathizing with the sorrowing and defeated. Perfect peace towards all things, being at peace with all the world, a profound reconciliation to the divine order of the universe. Such are the virtues that transcend both vice and virtue. They include all that virtue embodies, while going beyond it into divine truth. They are the fruits of innumerable efforts to achieve, the glorious gifts of those who overcome. They constitute the 10-jeweled crown prepared for the calm brow of those who have conquered themselves. The mind of the sage is adorned with these majestic virtues. By them, the sage is eternally shielded from sin and sorrow, from harm and hurt, from trouble and turmoil. In them, the sage abides in happiness, in blessedness, in bliss so pure and tranquil, so deep and high, so far transcending all the fleeting excitements of self, as to be unknown and incomprehensible to the self-seeking consciousness. The sage has conquered passion and has come to lasting peace. As the mighty mountain remains unmoved by the turbulent ocean that beats at its base, so the mind of the sage, towering in lofty virtue, remains unshaken by the tempests of passion which beat unceasingly upon the shores of life. Good and wise, you, the sage, are ever more happy and serene, transcendently virtuous. You live in beatific bliss. Chapter 7. Peace. Where passion is, peace is not. Where peace is, passion is not. To know this is to master the first letter in the divine language of perfect deeds. To know that passion and peace cannot live together is to be well prepared to renounce the lesser and embrace the greater. Men pray for peace, yet cling to passion. They foster strife, yet pray for heavenly rest. This is ignorance, profound spiritual ignorance. It is not to know the first letter in the alphabet of things divine. Hatred and love, strife and peace cannot live together in the same heart. Where one is admitted as a welcome guest, the other will be turned away as an unwelcome stranger. Despise another, and you will be despised by others. Oppose your fellow man, and you yourself will be resisted. You should not be surprised and mourn that people are divided. You should know that you are propagating conflict. You should understand your lack of peace. He is brave who conquers another, but he who conquers himself is supremely noble. He who is victorious over another may in turn be defeated, but he who overcomes himself will never be subdued. Perfect peace is achieved by the way of self-conquest. You cannot understand it, cannot approach it, until you see the supreme necessity of turning away from the fierce fighting of things without and entering the noble warfare against evils within. Those of you who have realized that the enemy of the world is within and not without, that your own ungoverned thoughts are the source of confusion and conflict, that your own unrestrained desires are the violators of your peace, and the peace of the world, you are already on the saintly way. If you have conquered lust and anger, hatred and pride, selfishness and greed, you have conquered the world. You have slain the enemies of peace, and peace remains with you. Peace does not fight. It's not partisan. It has no blatant voice. The triumph of peace is an unassailable silence. One who is overcome by force is not thereby overcome in their heart. They may become a greater enemy than before. But one who is overcome by the spirit of peace is thereby changed at heart. What was once an enemy has become a friend. Force and strife work upon the passions and fears, but love and peace reach out and reform the heart. The pure-hearted and wise have peace in their hearts. It enters into their actions, they apply it in their lives. It's more powerful than strife, it conquers where force would fail. Its wings shield the righteous. Under its protection, the harmless are not harmed. It affords a secure shelter from the heat of selfish struggle. It is a refuge for the defeated, a tent for the lost, and a temple for the pure. Where peace is practiced and possessed and known, then sin and remorse, grasping and disappointment, craving and temptation, desiring and grieving, all the turbulence and torment of the mind, are left behind in the dark sphere of self to which they belong, and beyond which they cannot go. Beyond where these dark shadows move, the radiant plains of divine beatitude bask in eternal light, and to these you, the traveller on the high and holy way, comes in due time. From the blinding swamps of passion, through the thorny forests of many vanities, across the arid deserts of doubt and despair, you travel on, not turning back nor straying your course. You ever move towards your sublime destination until at last you come, a humble and lowly, yet strong and radiant conqueror, to the beautiful city of peace.